Welcome everybody to our session today. We are really happy to have this session. We are here with Claudia, Peter, Luis, James, and we are really excited that you joined us today. So we would like you to share where you are joining us from and share some questions on the chat, and be ready to learn and be ready as well to contribute. As we start, I am going to share a slide, an introductory slide from Catalyst, and let's have fun. Let's engage, and yay! So in a minute.
Welcome to Catalyzing Change Week. This year's Catalyzing Change Week is about solutions from the front lines by social innovators.
In 2022, Catalyst 2030 concentrated its efforts on bringing proximate leaders and frontline solutions to the forefront. Collaborations led by members from the Global South produced groundbreaking reports on climate and transforming education, with an emphasis on offering local solutions. We continued our mission to create an enabling environment for social entrepreneurs to flourish by initiating a letter to donors, signed by more than 1,200 social entrepreneurs and innovators. The Catalyst 2030 Awards ceremony was spectacular, and the awards themselves welcomed by the private sector, governments, bio multilaterals and donors.
Catalyst 2030 as a movement is disruptive.
One of the best things I think that's come out of Catalyst 2030 so far is incredible collaboration across the ecosystem that just didn't exist before Catalyst came into being.
The thing I love most about Catalyst is that it's an open movement for social entrepreneurs around the world.
I would encourage anyone who's looking to be more connected with their local communities around social development goals to come along to Catalyzing Change Week.
Welcome to Catalyzing Change Week.
So yes, welcome to Catalyzing Change Week. I hope you are ready to learn, and I am going to pass it over to James. James, here we go.
Great. Thank you, Caroline, and welcome everyone. Welcome to the session on how is education reflecting the urgency of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I encourage everyone who's joining us here today to put your name in the chat, and let us know where you're joining from. It's always interesting to see the folks that are joining us from right around the world as part of Catalyst 2030. So my name is James Stotch. I'm with the Institute for Community Prosperity at Mount Royal University. And I'm joining you today from the traditional territory of the Siksikaitsitapi, or the Blackfoot people, which stretches, their territory stretches from the Yellowstone region in the south to all the way north to Edmonton, and then from the Rockies into what is now Saskatchewan. The Treaty 7 portion of that is now called, and what is now called Canada, is home to the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai, Stoney Nakoda, Tsuut'ina Dene, and Métis Region 3. So when we think about the purpose of education, the topic of today's talk, and the purpose of school in particular, we normally ask, is education, I don't know, about getting a good job? Is it about creating some kind of talent pipeline to drive economic growth? Is it about becoming active citizens and building healthy democracies? Is it about critical thinking and navigating our exponentially more complex, daunting information environment? Or is it just about fostering a love of learning? But presumably, the main reason most societies heavily invest in education and often subsidize education is the reason we least explore, which is, to what extent might education be, or ought to be, about developing the skills and the confidences and knowledge to better human communities, human societies, and of course, the ecosystems they depend upon. So the preeminent global benchmark for tracking the betterment of both environment and society is, of course, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. So this session is designed to provide examples of how the SDGs can be used to transform education and training to help achieve the global goals. And we want to dig into SDG education. How can it help people and organizations incorporate the goals into their work? But also, how can educational institutions be agents or locuses of change, not simply around the SDGs, but beyond the SDGs? So we're going to talk a little bit about futures thinking. We're going to talk about the role of advanced technology, AI. We're going to talk about both formal education, K-12, as well as universities and colleges, as well as informal kinds of learning. So I want to thank Brenda Hirschmer with Campus for Communities of the Future. Brenda is also co-chair of the Catalyst 2030 Canada chapter for designing this session and assembling this amazing panel. And I'm delighted to be joined today by three outstanding change makers from the US and Canada. We were actually going to be joined by four people. Nicole Swedlow, who's with the she's the executive director of Compass Education, which is a global network of inspired educators committed to empowering schools to think systemically and act sustainably. Nicole's doing amazing work. Unfortunately, she cannot join us today due to a family emergency. But we are joined by Claudia Akel, who is the co-founder and managing partner of SDG Investors and the founder and CEO of Social Impact Movement. We're also joined by Peter Bishop, who's the founder and executive director of Teach the Future, which encourages and supports educators, teachers, and administrators to introduce futures thinking into their classes and schools at all levels. And also by Luis Patricio, who teaches environmental stewardship and participatory futures, and is the co-lead of SDG Cities, a collaborative, community-driven project supporting localization of the SDGs in Guelph and London, Ontario. So we decided to approach this conversation today as a dialogue instead of a series of kind of lengthy PowerPoint presentations. We have an hour and a half, or just under an hour and a half for this discussion. And what I'm going to do is start with a dialogue between the panelists and then open it up to the audience for questions before leaving us with kind of one last wrap-up round of closing comments. As I pose the first question to each of the panelists, please take the opportunity to provide a little bit of a biographic sketch of yourself to tell us what it is you do now and how you approach your work. And we all know how long it can take to get new materials into curricula. And although I like to say that changing the curriculum in today's context is a bit like changing the flavor of ice cream in order to protect your arteries, I'm curious to know about pedagogy, how you approach learning, and I'm also curious about the content you use. So I'm actually going to start with Luis. I'm intrigued by the SDGs Cities Academy that you are building. And the SDGs 101 course that I'm sure you'll talk about, and this notion of digital badging. So Luis, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and to tell us a little bit more about how you approach learning through SDG Cities Academy.
Absolutely. Thanks, James. Hello, everyone. My name is Luis. As James said, I am based in London, Ontario, Canada. And I'm one of the co-leads of the SDG Cities program. And the main goal of our work is to look at the global goals, the SDGs, and try to translate, try to localize, and how and to make meaning at the local level. And I think that really relates to education and how we approach education, because we believe our approach is a place-based education. So just like the SDGs, we understand that education needs to be relational, needs to be connected to the place where you live, your geography, the people involved, and the challenges that you're facing locally. So through the program, the SDG Cities program, we developed the SDG Cities Academy. It's a partnership with another city also here in Ontario, Canada. So, and we started through the pandemic. A lot of our programming was happening online. synchronously through Zoom sessions, where we wanted to raise awareness about the SDGs, share about the interconnections, and then connect to the challenges that those groups were facing. Our first, and we started, it was really like a pilot project, so we had a very broad approach. We started working with nonprofit organizations, because that's our main audience and network. This kind of low-hanging fruit for us, and how they can use the SDGs to advance their work and integrate into their like planning, programming, reporting, and many other activities that they do. We also had an academy that we developed for like just general audience, so individuals in their local communities who were trying to do work in different areas. And then we had another couple of cohorts that were more targeted to university students, undergrad students. And again, looking at how their curriculum, their course, their program, and how to bring a more holistic lens, a more like critical lens, and always from that place-based education lens. From all of the experience with those different cohorts, we kind of distilled the essence, like the main aspects of we saw that people wanted to learn and needed to learn about the SDGs and how to apply that. And we created first we created the online course, and it's available, it's free. The SDG 101 course kind of set the like a base level about the information about the SDGs, primarily from that local perspective, and how, and our audience is like a Canadian audience, so we're localizing the SDGs into a Canadian context. And also we developed a few modules, and some of those modules are not are in person. We're actually, part of our team is delivering a workshop today on another city here in Ontario about SDG storytelling. And I'll put the link. I see there's a comment on the chat, so just quickly check that. I'll put the link for our academy. And you want to know more, I'd be happy to share. I don't want to take too much time. I can definitely talk about how we're using SDGs in the environmental stewardship course at your university as well. But James, I'll go back to you to see if you want to check with some of the other presenters.
Thank you, Louise. And I'm really intrigued that you actually work with nonprofits, because my own observation, very anecdotal, is that like there's some decent uptake in the corporate sector around SDGs. It's some decent uptake in municipalities and at that local government level. I haven't noticed it very much in the nonprofit world. So good for you for working on that front. And I'm just curious, do you ever work outside of Ontario?
Because the program, some of our programming is online and is actually available for free. We do have a few, we have been working with a few other groups outside of Ontario, but mostly Canada. And I should say, like, our organization, Pillar Nonprofit Network, it's definitely what we call like a chamber of nonprofits. So we definitely serve the nonprofit sector, but we also work in cross-sector collaboration space, right? So part of our, most of our participants were nonprofits, but we also had some small businesses and social enterprises working with us. And it was a very interesting cross-pollination. The way that we designed the course, obviously many of those principles and how we apply the SDGs at a organizational level apply for nonprofits and for businesses and social enterprises as well. And we recently received, the City of London received the UNESCO City of Music designation from the UN. And we've been working also with local government, and again, from that organizational perspective. So obviously there are some particular aspects to those different groups. But I think that the strength is to bring those different actors in the same room together and find what they have in common and how we can work together. And the SDG, we use the SDG as that shared language, right, to identify how and what we want to work together.
That's great, and great that you work with undergrads too. I should briefly shout out that we have 1 or 2 people from our own campus SDG hub joining us today, and working on that issue of how do we get undergrads involved. And on that, maybe I'll move on to Claudia. This notion of working with universities is really intriguing. I've been prepping for a local TEDx talk on Saturday about the topic of universities. How do we get universities to actually embrace social innovation? Because it's a real struggle, and it's a decades-long, maybe centuries-long struggle to do that. Claudia, I notice that you have an interest in working with universities and a lot of experience and thoughts in that regard. So I'll get you to introduce yourself, and I know you have a couple of slides to put up. So I'll hand things over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, James. It's a pleasure to join this conversation at the Catalyzing Change Week 2023. I speak with you guys directly from the United States. I'm located in Miami, Florida. I'm originally from Brazil, but living in the US since 2013. So the story of having universities to change, it's quite a bold idea to do, but honestly, what I've been seeing right now and working with 2 areas. So mainly we have a company that foments technology. It's called the SDG Investors. And then we invest in technologies that are advancing the Sustainable Development Goals and propelling, accelerating, and are using deep tech. We also use the nonprofit social impact movement to facilitate the entry level for certain universities who cannot achieve the forms of the means to finance it. So one way or the other one, the university can have the technologies that we can offer. So to talk about your question and how I see change on the university level, it is complicated in a sense that changing or moving things from the traditional class curriculum, it's not simple. As you all know, there is a whole division and layers of changes that you need to apply instead in directions to innovating and bringing something new for students. However, what we are seeing right now, it's total eagerness and willingness from teachers to try new tools and new approaches, because we all know how disengaging the traditional methodology of having classes set up as, I use a lot the Paulo Freire style, definition of the banking system of education. So we have merely people who toss and transfer knowledges, but in a way that the knowledge doesn't stick to the new acquires. So the ones, the apprentices, are not having the fulfillment and transforming this knowledge in something that really can achieve a beneficial for the future, for whatever this person will be taking as a role or position. So the whole idea of innovation in bringing new class styles is to prepare the citizens for the future. So I put here, universities have a crucial role in achieving and forming these future citizens. So what we do through our approach, both on SDG Investors and Social Impact Movement, is to inspire and to promote an acceleration of the Sustainable Development Goals, supporting the SDG literacy programming. So we facilitate class content by providing a technology tool. What here is presented, the sdgtalks.ai, and I'm happy to share on the link as well on the chat. But it's majorly a news hub that we created, filtering SDG news every day. So we bring 6 news per hour, separated by different SDGs, and each hour, new news are coming. So at the end of the day, you have several news. Most interesting is that what happens when you open the news or you Google something, you will not find news classified by the SDGs because it's complicated. So that's where the technology plays a huge value. We identify and we're able to cluster, and we're able to put it down, clip, and allocate under the 17 goals. How we do that, if we're doing that the best way, well, only the students and the teachers will tell us. Because right now what we have is a complete open idea for students to formulate content. So once the content comes in by the bot, there's also another role that the students play. They become, together with the instructor, they are invited to write or to create content that can come from an article, that can come from a podcast, an interview, a video, whatever they prefer. The technology or the platform welcomes it, and it's able to qualify and publish that. Then to facilitate, again, we put a window with the OpenAI, I mean the ChatGPT, it's working together to collaborate in the creation of this content. Why we're doing this? First of all, to take the fear out of the students and the same teacher. The students to use ChatGPT in school, and from the teacher side, to tell them that technology is here and we need to embrace and facilitate it. And then it is the last part of what we believe through SDG investors and social impact movement, that the role that we play as responsible businesses in how we shift the technology that it's now open, the OpenAI and all this learning day-by-day technology, how we can create new routes or conduct, let's say, on a biased way for the social good, what this technology is learning.
So I am totally intrigued that you are using AI and ChatGPT in the classroom and just kind of embracing that. I do want to dig into that in a little bit, but in the meantime, I want you to if you could put the link you had on the slide in the chat, that'd be amazing, because I did check it out the other day, and it's pretty amazing in terms of how news is tagged to the SDGs and how much good news it is too, that it's not just kind of a torrent of really troubling or often disabling news. I do want to ask you though, before I move on to Peter, in your bio, it says that you have a master's in community and social change. And so I just want to know, like, how on earth did such a cool sounding program find its way into a university setting? Tell me more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is part of my life journey. I moved to the United States with the purpose to become a social entrepreneur. So from Brazil, it's not that I couldn't do that in Brazil. Obviously, I could have done that. And actually, I prepared myself there and before moving to here. But it was on my head, this idea of, okay, let's find a master's program where I can improve what I've been doing before. So I come from the business traditional side, administration and in dealing with our family companies. And then when I moved to here, I found this amazing master's course offered by the University of Miami. It's called the Community and Social Change. And so I got, like you, I got intrigued. I said, wow, this is really something interesting. And I remember interviewing the instructors or, the people from the university. I didn't know any of them back then. And also I came to other universities because I was doing, my shopping in terms of, okay, I need to decide. And the possibility was to do in Miami. And so I had to interview a few ones here. And I ended up choosing this master's that stays under the Human and Education Development School because it has a community psychologist approach, which is something that obviously not only I became one of them, but I learned. And it's fascinating. It's understanding the ecosystem of society in cities and where you operate with your company, with your businesses as a community psychologist, which means as a totality, not as like the psychologist understands individual one by one and understands their problems and go on a one by one level. We as community psychologists, we analyze the structure, how the society is functioning, what is shifting. And I believe that's what really prepared me in a way to understand society as I do now, as I work at, and being able to formulate businesses, nonprofits, and participate on several areas where I know my input can improve on a certain way or make society better. So I'm totally grateful to that master course and the learnings that I got.
Thank you. That's really amazing. What a cool story. So moving on to Peter. Peter, I know your background and specialty isn't in the SDGs per se. It's really about this area of futures thinking and futures literacy. Just in Canada, when we talk about education, especially K-12 social studies education, it does seem that the vast majority of the learning is focused on the past, on history, and almost none of it seems to be focused on talking about the future. So I'm totally intrigued by your work and how you bring futures thinking to the space of education. So tell us more about that.
Well, thank you very much, James. Before I answer your question, let me first of all, as you did, recognize the ancestral home. I'm coming to you from Grass Valley, California, which is the ancestral home of the Masenin tribe along the Yuba River and the foothills of the Sierra Nevada. So it's a wonderful, it's a beautiful place. We have granddaughters here, and my daughter and my wife take care of, are raising two strong and independent young women, which is a mission in and of itself. It's wonderful. And by all means, let me shout out to Claudia, because I had not heard the term community psychology in a long time. Actually, I did my dissertation with a student at Michigan State University who studied under a gentleman named Bill Fairweather, who basically was one of the founders of that concept of community psychology in the 1960s. It's a great link. Thank you very much, Claudia, for reminding me again that field is still there. So yes, believe it or not, almost everything we do in education is either about the past or has roots in the past. And indeed, our life today has roots in the past, no doubt about that. But do we introduce students to the future in school? And unfortunately not. I believe that the general traditional view of education is to transmit and pass on, and indeed to socialize students into the society in which they're growing up and in which they're going to live, which is a wonderful mission. It's a good mission. It's not the wrong mission, but it's incomplete, because you have to assume that their life in the future will be like the parents' life, their teacher's life, their adults' life in the past. And to some extent, that's true. That's not wrong, but it's incomplete. We know now with the rate of change that's appearing that knowing about the past is part of what we need to do. So we're not trying to substitute anything, but we're working in addition to a both and, not an either or. So shouldn't we have future in schools as well as the past? And that's our mission. The SDGs, of course, are an extremely important part of our heading into the future as a civilized world. And I hope and the progress we're making on them is wonderful. But our context is somewhat larger, and that is all things about the future. SDGs are part of it, but so is in general technology, in general politics, in general the economy. In fact, if Nicole were here, she would be talking about the systems approach to the world, that everything is connected and we need to treat it as a holistic entity. Just as Claudia said about the community and Luis about the city, this is an organism, and we should be introducing that organism to students while they are young, because they do pick up impressions about the future, although their teachers never probably mention the word in their classrooms. They pick up impressions that, gee, we could predict the phases of the moon. Why can't we predict the phases of the economy? They learn history as one series of events after the other, each of which is understandable and caused by previous conditions. Well, why can't we know what the next series of events will be, caused by the conditions of the present or the near future? And those are not wrong ideas, but again, they are incomplete. Some of the future is predictable, but some is not. And what we do is try and introduce students to the fact that they should be thinking always in alternatives, not as singular anything. Even the answers to most of their questions in school. There are multiple ways of doing things. There are multiple answers to most interesting questions, and we should have discussion about that. So there's a general purpose here, even beyond the future, and that is to introduce a form of education that is more appropriate for the 21st century, where we are dealing with multiple trade-offs, multiple issues, all interacting simultaneously. So I've worked and it's been my pleasure to work with my good friend, Brenda Hirschmer. Thank you very much, Brenda, for recommending me for this panel in her community, his College of the Campus for Communities in the future. We've done some great work together, and I look forward to the discussion with my other panelists and indeed with the rest of the people on this call as we think about, and let me leave you with the phrase that the dean who hired me in Houston to, not to run this program, but eventually it resulted in me taking this program over. And he said, we teach about the past, why can't we teach about the future? That's a question that I ask every parent, every teacher, every adult when I give talks. Is there a reason we shouldn't? Well, it used to be we didn't know how to. Now we know how. Now we should start. Okay, so thank you, James.
Peter, that's really, really amazing. Thank you for that, and also for just riffing on how we need to think differently about education in general. Asking great questions, not necessarily fixating on answers. And Claudia's use of ChatGPT. It's interesting how we live in this rich information environment where we have answers relatively at the ready, pretty easy to access and pretty ubiquitous. So what's education for in a post-answer economy, right? Where answers are easy. So let's not spend our time in the classroom doing that. What else could we do? That's really inspiring work. Claudia and Luis in particular, and Peter, feel free to chime in. My impression is that educational institutions, whether we're talking K-12 or post-secondary, are in general quite slow to incorporate and take up the SDGs. Maybe that's a misimpression. But I'm curious, how frequently do you see the SDGs included in school curricula or school learning programs? Do you know of any data, or absent data, maybe your best educated guess as to what proportion of schools seem to include the SDGs on a regular basis? Any thoughts on that? Either Luis, Claudia, or Peter?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, James. I don't know if there's like an index or a list of schools or universities that are integrating the SDGs. There is one international ranking, it's called the Times Higher Education, THE, that does have hundreds of universities that are so they're ranking how those universities are integrating the SDGs. And they have the methodology on the website. It is a very interesting approach, actually. And I definitely, I'll find the link and I'll share on the chat. So they're looking not just at how the obvious, right, like education and research, obviously, so how they're using the SDGs, which programs and what disciplines, research, what information you're creating, what knowledge you're creating, and how they map into the SDGs, but also in terms of community outreach. So what goes beyond the university and how you're using the SDGs beyond the university walls, the campus walls, and also the university not only as an agent of change in terms of the information that they create and produce, but the universities, those institutions as a target of change. So how sustainable are their facilities, their practices, their processes, their governance, the way that they manage their financial operations. So it's a very broad and holistic ranking system, and it uses all the 17 SDGs. And here in London, the Western University of Ontario is actually the #1 university in Canada in that ranking, and is the 3rd in the world. It's obviously a big, deal for Western University, and they're like looking at the big picture. And I think Claudia mentioned that, like, it takes time. Those institutions, the bigger they are, the harder it is to move the needle in certain areas. And I think the SDGs do provide a very helpful framework to have a shared language across departments, across groups in the universities, faculty, students, administration, partnerships with government, with private sector. So I think the SDGs can help steer that change that does need time to be put in effect. And I'll share a couple of links about the ranking that I just mentioned.
Thank you. Claudia, anything to add on that?
That's right.
Yes, that's what Luis said. It's true. So there's this link that you just shared on the chat, James, that it's the only one that I know that provides some sort of global ranking of universities based on the Sustainable Development Goals. Not even the United Nations itself, they don't have it as a rank, precisely because universities are not, all of them, very clear if they use the Sustainable Development Goals or not. Obviously, they're talking about climate, sustainability, areas that are directly related to the SDGs. But in our case here in South Florida, for instance, it's very minimum the amount of universities that are really using SDG language. That's what I call SDG literacy programming. For instance, the local community college called the Miami-Dade College, they are on purpose. I mean, they have been insistently doing many activities. And if you interview any of their students, they will know what the SDGs are at the bottom level, minimum. Whereas if you go to even my alma mater, the University of Miami, we've been doing, since 2018, we've been doing several activities and in-person activities, obviously not during the pandemic years, but what we have shown is astonishing and wow, some students don't know at all, not even that the SDGs exist or related to the United Nations. They start questioning things, what, UN? So it comes to a politicized way, which we need to avoid, and especially Florida, a state where everything related to ESG is being banned. But on the contrary, we see the minds from who is the most interested ones in progressing these goals, which are the youth. They are concerned and they are looking to learn more. I receive like daily calls to organization and willing to volunteer. What can I do? To the point that we don't even have capacity or bandwidth to deal with all those interests in volunteering, all interested in volunteering with us. But what I certainly acknowledge is with the lack or without a formal remodeling on our higher education curriculum. I'm talking about mostly about the higher ed, obviously, not the public, not the K-12. But if we have some sort of common agreement on a curriculum that will interfere or intersect with the sustainability, climate, justice, we can put the SDGs on board for many of those universities. And we have another duty that I'm going to extend this, James, because I believe we have a shared humanity collectively duty on this. We're talking about AI. We're talking about this powerful tool that it's learning from us every day. Thousands of 100 million people logged in the first week. 100 million people. Can you imagine right now the numbers? I mean, I can only, imagine the scale of that. And we know some of the leaders who created that are afraid. Elon Musk have demonstrated some sort of wall, we should stop. We understand that humanity is not going to stop. We have lived that on the internet moment, and it's unstoppable. But we can provide or imprint on that. How? For instance, in the case of our technology, if we have many students from different parts of the globe asking the right questions to that bot, to that intelligence, and negotiating, right? Creating the content on a dialogue basis, and like interviewing, asking, and then response, copy and paste some parts. The way we did in the past, actually. So the only difference is that we used encyclopedias and other materials. But right now we have one source, one basket that we can dig in and get this content right off. If we ask simultaneously thousands of millions of questions related to impact, related to what humanity thinks about climate solutions, or clean water, education levels. Can you imagine what we're doing? We are completely shifting the paradigm of this technology. How? By the input we're giving to them. So that's to me, when I talk to people, and I often say the good counterpart of using the technology and having the technology inside class and university campus is majorly this shared responsibility.
I'm really intrigued by a couple of things that have come up in this part of the conversation. One is this notion of community colleges outperforming universities. Miami-Dade outperforming University of Miami, and that I can say absolutely in Canada, community colleges are way ahead of universities when it comes to talking about the SDGs, embracing the SDGs, incorporating it into their programming. I'm curious to know if anyone has any insights as to why that might be. Any thoughts? I really don't. I really struggle with that. And it sounds like Western may be an exception to that.
But I think you're right, James. And I think it's part of it, and it's a bit of a speculation here, but I think part of it is size, and part of it is how community colleges really need to be nimble in terms of the programs and the kind of education that they deliver that really needs to be connected. They tend to be more practical, right? It's about trades, and that's what the SDGs are really about. we can have, high-level conversations and discussions on how to move forward and how to connect those things. But when it comes to colleges, you have the arts or nursing or GIS programs or like film or carpentry or agriculture and all those things. You can find such a direct correlation to one SDG, and the way they usually see the SDGs is like you have the window to the SDG, but then you can find a connection to all the others. And I think the community colleges can make that in a much better way than universities. It's an example here in London as well, even though they're not so good at promoting because they had a smaller team. But Fanshawe College have initiatives with students to help reduce water and energy bills. They have like a challenge every year with the students, and they had a Deep Pave Paradise event on their campus. They do have biking parks. So they are looking of ways on how to integrate the SDGs in the work that they do. And again, it goes beyond when we're talking about education institutions, it goes beyond the SDG 4, but it's really that holistic view and how you integrate the SDGs, not just as an agent of change, but as a target of change, like looking at their own practices and how they can reframe and change how they do things in a more critical way. I think it really speaks, Claudia, it really speaks to the Paulo Freire pedagogy, the pedagogy of the oppressed. It's very much based on the local and current context where every learner is immersed in as that critical reflection of who I am, what I am doing here, and how I can shape the world in a way that makes sense for me and for the society and for others around me. But I think I agree with you, James, and in that sense that community colleges are way ahead of the game.
So I do have a whole roster of other questions, but I want to take some time to bring the audience in. And I know that I think Debbie had her hand up. So if anyone has a question for the panelists, please either put it in the chat or put your hand up, and I'll try and monitor for that. So Debbie, would you like to set us off?
I did want to add to what you just said about community colleges embracing the SDGs. Across the world, the business schools, there's a major accreditation body, AACSB, has made social impact a key indicator. It actually goes into place in June of 2023, so next month. And all business schools in the world that have that accreditation now have to prove social impact. That is going to be a seismic shift, I think, in business education across the world. And the smaller business accreditation body, they're also doing something similar. So I think we're going to see hopefully an increase in the kids coming out of these schools to understand the basics of sustainable development goals and looking at social impact. But to what level and what experience they have is still in question.
Great, thank you for that. Any other questions or interventions from the audience at this point? Okay, I can keep the chat monitor. Maria.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, James. I was thinking, I have worked with many international organizations, working directly with departments of education for many years and NGOs around the world. And I was just looking at the data from UNESCO. I shared the link. It's launching a survey, a 2023 survey. The latest data that there is about this indicator is indicator target 4.7, which is basically capturing the integration of content around global citizenship and the Sustainable Development Goals in schools' curricula. So I think the new survey will probably give us new data, but looking at this, we can already see that across the world, very few regions report fully reflecting the SDGs and global citizenship into their curricula. So I think that's important. So, but given that we have this amazing panel here, I was trying to think that from you all work from different, I think, perspectives, which is great. And trying to think, I have also recently been working with UNESCO's Global Citizenship Division. So it's really very hard to take this to the classroom. And as you all probably very well know, so that's why, Claudia, I think what you're doing is amazing. I was just looking at the website, and but also Peter, I have been following the movement about futures teaching for a long time. So what I think what this calls is for a different approach, and that's why we are all here, together, trying to think of how we could innovate around, like, calling for the new partnerships. We all know how difficult it is to work with ministries of education and with the teachers and teachers training and all that. So what are your views about that, and how to kind of bring together things like what you're doing, Claudia, with what, for example, Peter is doing with Teach the Future? Thank you.
Oh, Maria, thank you so much for your incredible vision on that, because it's like it is, as you said, it's completely hard to change and to implement at a scale level. So we often find one professor who would like to, okay, I want to use SDG talks and implement it as part of my class curriculum and have the students. So we're probably rolling that this summer during the summer course for Columbia University, together with the SDSN, because they really impressed and would like to use that. And then when you talk about full implementation, it's another level. It's completely different. What my vision is, we don't have like one institution, like globalized as, for instance, the United Nations or the UNESCO, that it's able to recommend and be heard on their recommendation at a top level. I mean, they can recommend this and this, that approach, but we lack this sort of the big weaver, the one who will be connecting all the dots and putting us together, Luis and Peter, and ourselves. We all come from a different perspective with the same problem. The problem is that we don't have today the SDGs being taught or being present as we need, because we're talking about unlocking several new possibilities and creating new businesses for the future. Where are the people where these new businesses will be? I mean, where are they right now? They are at school. In a decade, they'll be in the different roles and creating companies and imagining things. So we don't have time to lose, but also I'm really concerned of not having like a common ground where we all could step in and say, hey, we have this, we're trying. I mean, together here in our end, we're meeting with several parts of the UN, UNDP, UN technology, this and that. And it's like a ball game almost. You talk to this and talk to that. Oh, it's hard to do. So, you know how it is.
Yeah, Peter, did you want to weigh in as well?
Yeah, I agree with Claudia a great deal. I'm not in the schools as much as Luis and the others here, But I do like to think about, as I said before, the fundamental assumptions of education, which I think creates the fundamental difficulty, the root cause, if you will. I mentioned the transmission of knowledge from the past into the future in order to socialize future generations is one of their primary missions. A couple of other missions, and Claudia's talked about the university. The university, frankly, is not as dedicated to learning as the community colleges are. Community colleges are dedicated to student-centered learning and their preparation for their future. Frankly, if there's learning that goes on in the university, it's more on the part of the faculty. Thank you. The fact that their mission is to develop new knowledge, which is another wonderful thing and obviously absolutely necessary, but they deal therefore in narrow specializations in order to advance the learning of their own discipline and their own understanding, and then sharing that through research and ultimately through learning. But the university is not so much dedicated to that. So the reason that we have a hard time is that we're dealing with narrow specializations where the purpose in the university is primarily research. So the message that we talk about introducing students to SDGs and doing all of that is not really part of the mission. So if we understand what they believe their mission is, we can perhaps talk about that and challenge the root that their mission should also be the learning of their students as well as the learning of the faculty.
Really interesting.
I do want to mention, I put it in the chat. And this is your group, which is why I wanted to be in your session at the same time, is we are launching academic hubs where we're bringing together all the major academic groups in different regions of the world. And James, I wanted to work with you guys in Canada. And then obviously other folks in the US, and then also in Mexico, for a North American academic hub, where we're pulling in all the major organizations. And so instead of competing against each other, we're pulling each other together to collaborate. Like the community college is a big piece of that as well. And so if we're successful at this, right, then all that shared knowledge is being shared across regions, and then depth-wise from high school to community colleges to higher ed and beyond. We'll see if we pull that off, but we launched META just now, and we're gonna launch the Africa Academic Hub at a conference in Africa next week.
Thank you. Dave.
Great, thank you. That's very exciting.
Canada, we have hubs in Canada and Mexico, so we'll definitely put you in touch with them.
I see Brenda has her hand up as well.
Yeah.
I do. I have a question, but first of all, I just want to convey my respect for all of you who are working in post-secondary institutions, because I do know how hard it is, because I was a professor at a community college and I did not have your patience and I left. So I do know that it's really hard. But one of the things, like my question really, because I think one of the things I know is that we have to make it really easy for those, for academics to teach things like the SDGs, which cut across the disciplines. And I wondered about the potential of micro-credentials. We had one great success story here in Canada, where the Engineering Association is providing a free opportunity for students to add this value-added micro-credential. And I just wondered what you thought about that, and if that would work for what it is you think students need to learn.
Louise, you should take that one.
Yes, absolutely. And you did made a reference to that, James, when we started our chat. So with the SDG Cities Academy, like I said, we did 3 or 4 cohorts, and it's kind of piloting and refining the content and the curriculum. And the modules that we are launching now, there are in a way individual modules that you don't have to go through the whole academy. Our first academy had 10 weeks, was like a long program. So those courses are more self-contained, and we are using micro credentials for those courses. So we launched I think just a month or maybe 2 months ago. So it's very recent, our first SDG 101 available online, but we do have micro credentials for that one. and for the other modules that we are also using. And if I can make so we'll see where it goes and what is the reception of that experience using micro-credentials. We are excited about it. I think that will be an uptake, and I think this will be helpful for the people taking the course. If I can make a plug, because I know we're talking a lot about post-secondary institutions, and I want to just make a quick comment about K-12. One of the participants in our first group was actually a couple of people from the local school board. So it was an interesting opportunity to see from their perspective, what is the struggle to implement this in the whole system, those kind of changes in the whole system, and the amount of work and thought and processes and steps that needs to take place to make that change. And what happened is that we designed, it's one of those courses that we are designing now. We design a few courses, a few SDG courses to be implemented and tested in a few schools. So it's the same approach of piloting and testing and see what really works, and then trying to scale that out after that, like we did with the SDG Cities Academy, and now we have it online, available for anyone. With the school system, we're like trying those programs now. We're going to start in September our first tries and grade 5 and 6 in some of the classes, and we want to document that and make those materials available for anyone who wants to use in their schools, but also for the local school board to see if they can use that and implement as like a practice for all the schools in their area. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, we've been working the project for 2 years only, and I think we've been doing great progress so far.
Thank you, Luis.
Emma made a comment in the chat around our micro credentials. Have we passed a threshold where micro credentials are sort of taken seriously, whether by employers or post-secondaries themselves? Are we seeing more interest and uptake and credibility around micro credentials? Any thoughts on that?
Is it okay? I just wanted to clarify one point with Luis. Sorry. So I just want to understand who's issuing the credential. Is it the universities or colleges themselves, or is it your academy? And
it's our academy.
Okay.
It's our academy. Yeah, because the credentials that we have so far, it's for the SDG one-on-one course, which is very basic, and some more specific technical courses. So we have one on SDG storytelling, on SDG impact reporting, and tracking. And for the courses that we will be delivering, we didn't have credentials for the course at the university, and I'm not sure we will have for the ones in the K-12 education. So it takes a little longer to get the approval process with the educational institutions. So we're using the credentials on those more technical and basic level courses, and also to learn how to use, and again, learning as we go. I think it's part of the social enterprise, right? An entrepreneurial model is to fail fast to learn faster and to improve faster. So we'll see, and hopefully we'll be able to include micro credentials on those courses at the university and at the schools as well. But thanks for the question, Brandon.
And just noting that Caroline has put into the chat the socialchangeinnovators.com link, which Debbie developed originally. It's an amazing tool, so I encourage you to fill it up with resources, and whether those are micro credentials or learning materials or reports or whatever. I'm intrigued by this challenge of looking at our campus and our own student hubs challenge of engaging students on the SDGs. The SDGs themselves, there's a kind of a 30,000 feet up in the air quality to it from some people's perspective. And so, our hub is actually in the process of rebranding themselves away from an SDG hub towards a kind of a campus change maker network, because they've had feedback from students that resonates much more strongly than SDGs, which seem a little bit obscure and abstract. Is that a barrier? Is that something we should be cognizant of or trying to address in some way?
But it's kind of phone call on a supposed to right, so phone call. Not really, if I'm like Alvin's no.
The audio is not good, Luis.
It's not me.
It wasn't you. It wasn't you.
Okay.
Oh, it's Anish. Let's mute him.
I told you last time I started working my language. I worked pretty hard, not a lot. But I've been doing it.
Were you able to unmute?
For some reason, I put him in the waiting room.
Okay.
For some reason, I couldn't mute him.
Okay, thanks.
But I will say this on the Changemaker name, all the research that Ashoka did, now this is several years ago, that word entrepreneurship, so social entrepreneur, not attractive because it's those business capitalists. So social innovation seemed to be better. Changemaker definitely resonates with young people. Sustainable development goal resonates in the global south where more people understand it. In the north, and I could see from a student perspective they're like, what's that? So I could see that challenge.
That's super helpful. Thank you, Debbie. That's great.
And if I can make a comment, James, sorry, is that okay?
Please do. Yes, great.
Just about one of the links that I put in the chat as well is that Our Futures Pledge is a document released by UNESCO recently. And I think it is a good connection between the work that Peter is doing, the SDGs and education. So one of the main challenges that we see, and there are like reports and surveys globally, is the eco-anxiety, right? Like the stress of all those global challenges that we're facing today, and how some generations are actually disengaging and taking action because it's just too overwhelming. And I think the work about thinking of the future and what probably will be, and how we can take action, it's very powerful in the sense of giving back agency to everybody really, but especially the younger generations that are on school right now, and how they can take action now to change the course of the future. So that's a very interesting report and work that UNESCO did. And I think it speaks to the SDGs because it's about creating that shared vision of what we see into the future. And right now it's 2030. And we'll probably we're gonna revise that and see what is our vision beyond that. But how we can actively think about how to get there, and then take action today to get us to that place where we want to be. So I just want to mention that report.
Thank you, Luis. Peter, I'm really intrigued with when you're working with students and talking to students, what are the issues, the frameworks that are engaging students in thinking about the future? I mean, we've had a little bit of discussion about AI, for example. What is it that is a hook or really lands well with students in your experience?
Thank you very much, James. And I apologize, I'm on a satellite link, and so I have latency in it. There is a delay here in rural US, which is not yet, DSL is not what it should be. So yes, one of the things that we get when we are asking students about their future and what they want to participate in their future is that their concerns are our concerns. There's not a huge difference between what they would like to see versus what we would like to see. And so the SDGs, I think they're a list, and so lists typically don't engage people. But if you could very quickly get to an SDG, what are you most interested in? Water, education, citizenship, governance, those kinds of things that the engagement could be a lot more, a lot higher and more productive. But the other thing is that they want a voice. They want to be listened to and to be heard and to be part of the discussion. So it's more of a process question that they have. Why are you guys talking about all this stuff and nobody is bringing it up with us, whether it's in school or in workshops or in government, whatever. And so I think it's very much a feeling of being left out. Hey guys, this is our future you're talking about. Why are we not participating? Now, what they add in content, of course, is a young person's imagination, a young person's creativity, also a young person's blasé view about constraints and issues and problems. And of course, that's wonderful. I'm glad they're too young. You'll get over that. Unfortunately, you'll become beaten down just like the rest of us. But that's a voice that we need to hear. So I think it's being at the table is more important than exactly what they say, because they want all of those SDGs. They want a clean world. They want a prosperous world. They want a safe world. There's nothing novel. We've covered it all. 17 SDGs. You could have 25, I guess, but they want to be at the table and they want to be heard. And for the educational purposes, one of the things I point out to educators is that we want our young people to be leaders. We want our young people to make a contribution to society. But making a contribution and leading is a skill. Skills are learned not through PowerPoints and textbooks, but learned through practice. We are teaching skills in schools. They're teaching them skills on the football field, in the theater program, in the student council, all on the outside of the classroom, unfortunately, but they're there. And the people who run those programs know how to teach skills, which is a little bit of instruction. Here's what we're going to do. Here's a little bit about how to do it. Now let's do it. Let's start kicking the ball around. Let's start, singing. Let's start acting, whatever, and then getting feedback as things go on. So if we want students to be leaders, we should help them practice being leaders, indeed, in the community, and indeed in the school itself. I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful to have an engaged student body that we're partnering with the teachers and the administration to create the kind of learning environment that is most suitable for them, where they have a voice. They don't run the school, but they have that voice that's listened to and respected. And that's what I hear from young people, James. Thank you for the question.
Very amazing. Really, really interesting thought. Yeah, it's we do a lot of co-curricular programming and, get students out into kind of uncomfortable positions where they're having to facilitate a community conversation, or they're having to, lead us some kind of a tour or an experience with real life people in real life settings, and it's profoundly uncomfortable for students, and yet it's a huge growth point in their learning. So that's a really important point. Luis talked about when we had our kind of preliminary conversation, this idea of what if we were to replace majors with challenges and actually focus on global challenges as a way to construct our learning pathway. Any examples of where people have done that, or any thoughts you have on that or a related topic?
Yeah, James, that's called project-based learning. It's it's popular, not well disseminated, but it's very popular in K-12, where the whole curriculum is various challenges. In fact, you in Canada have a very small elementary school in Toronto called Summit Micro School that her whole curriculum, they do a unit every 6 weeks, and they teach all of the normal subjects, but within that unit, they did the future of water in Toronto. They did the future of technology. So they cover the history, they cover the science and the math and the literature, and indeed they cover the future. They all work, the students now just realize, well, if we're going to talk about the future of AI, if we're going to talk about the automobiles, we're going to talk about the past, the present, and the future of whatever topic we cover. So that's one school that has implemented futures thinking very well. Because of our disciplinary focus in the university and even on the academic side of community colleges, there's a huge division within community colleges between what's called career and technical education, which are more or less the trades, and the academic side. So the academics really want to be universities. I characterize them, I apologize, but that's, you know, they have that academic mindset, as the high schools do. In the career and technical side, no, we're teaching you skills. We're giving you a chance to practice something, to learn something, things like that. Not that there's not knowledge involved, but the knowledge is the means to the implementation of the skills. It's not an end in itself. But that's the way that, so we do not have that mindset in the university.
If we probably have time for kind of one last closing questions, and not seeing any hands or additional questions in the chat. I'll throw it out to all of you, and maybe we'll start with Claudia. And that is, you know, if you had one wish for how education could transform itself in the service of a sustainable future, what would that one change be? And one critical early step that we could take on.
So I love the project-based style of class, because to me, we need to incorporate more of the plazas from the Greek style, where everybody was together listening and debating. I think that is missing in the whole structure of our class model. We are not anymore in the post-industrial revolution. So we don't need to train people to do repetitive tasks and without mind thinking of a critical thinking. It's just the opposite. We already have the technologies telling us we're going to have robots, we're going to have, you know, for the main activities, it's going to be a complete shift. So what are these students doing in the classroom behind a desk with a teacher in front of them? And just writing, memorizing, and doing, you know, testing. They are not being prepared for the future, and the future is really imminent. So to me, a big wish will be having a pool of the leader schools of the globe, some of them shifting their methodologies and even applying that to a younger age. So I mostly speak about the university level, but I understand also in the K-12, we need to start shifting and forming more students that are critical thinkers. And it's wrong to think of, okay, we form, like all the schools usually say, okay, here at my, you know, middle and high school, we form future critical thinkers. If you look at the way they structure their classes, the way the hierarchy, the hierarchy and the divisions and how it is just repeating the past, you can tell. I mean, you tell you're doing this, but honestly, that's not true. That's not happening. Whereas when you go to alternative methods of schooling, which differ a lot from the traditional ones or the top preferred schools from place to place, they are usually a minority school, and they are usually like an outsider, and people are feared, and only the daring parents would put their child on a curriculum like that, because nobody will believe So I think we have so many new things coming to us. We have the arrival of the Web3, the dissemination of the shared property. We have the OpenAI and other ones similar to, but the regenerative technology as a conversational model that it's going to evolve, and probably very soon will be with a printer right to us, and then by the time we interact, something's gotta get printed in hard printed. So we don't know. We gotta be prepared, and we gotta prepare fast our youth and our students. So my wish is that we have more crazy people in the power to innovate and push something really different from today. But it's gotta be a little crazy, because otherwise it's just the repeating the status quo. It's strong.
My wish is that I want to enroll in Claudia's class. Wouldn't that be amazing? Thank you. Luis.
I am very much in line with Claudia said, and like my program is the SDG city, so we totally work from the local perspective. The one thing that I wish is really to get out of the classroom is what we talk is what we mean when we say like experiential learning, and really get the students to see, feel, and learn in community. One of the assignments that I have in the classroom, one of the first assignments that I have in the classroom is visiting one of the environmentally significant areas in the city, and then reflecting on not only the environmental impact, but the social and economic impacts that that area has for the city. So I try to always do renewable assignments. So assignments that are not just going to be put on a shelf, graded and put on a shelf, but also can change how the students think, and also create opportunities for them to make a change in their own communities. So my one wish is city as a classroom, having classes for the city is the classroom.
I love that. Just a plug for programs like City Studio, which I think is franchised across Canada now. And we have a somewhat similar version called Vivacity in Calgary, and there's a few such programs that are kind of civic innovation. They do Jane's walks as part of their assignments, and really get out and kind of immerse themselves in the city. That's really cool.
We have a City Studio London here as well, James, hosted at our organization. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Great to know. Okay. Peter, your one wish.
Well, my wish is the title of our organization and social movement, Teach the Future. Of course, let's institutionalize futures thinking and futures literacy as an objective in both the K-12, the community college, the university curriculum, to prepare students for the future that they're actually going to live. The broader context there is what we've been talking about, shifting away from content, not completely. You have to know things. But my thought experiment, which I've never been able to do, I would love to do it, and that is to start a high school class in a fact-based course like history or science, and where students take the final exam on the very first day, but they can use their phones. And now, of course, ChatGPT, and see how well they learn. Somebody said the information and the content is already there. It was there before ChatGPT. It was there with Google. It was there even before Alta Vista and all of that. It was there. And why are we continuing to pound it into their heads? It used to be in the 20th century that knowledge was power. Knowledge is power, but you don't have to carry it around in your head anymore. You can get it from the internet. You can get it from your colleagues around the world. But your knowledge is in your network, both your technical network and your social network. It's not carried around in our heads. What we need to have in our heads or in our bodies, our whole embodied, is the ability to use that knowledge for good, for ourselves, for our families, for communities, et cetera, which is a skill. And I would just say that if I waved away, and I would say that futures thinking is a great way to start this process, because there is no text. There are no future facts. There are past facts, They're current facts. There are no future facts. So teachers who want to teach skills, when they're in a futures thinking classroom, as I said about the school in Istanbul, they're forced to be engaged with students in skill development, in skills acquisition. And so introducing the future would be my wish, James. Thank you for heading this session. Thanks for Brenda's recommendation and for my colleagues, Claudia and Luis, for doing the same thing. I think we have some offline discussions coming. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and I love that phrase, there are no future facts. Peter, Luis, Claudia, I just thank you for being with us today, taking the time to share so generously and thoughtfully. And you're doing really amazing work and catalytic work, and we just need to clone you and scale up and replicate what you were all doing. It's really an inspiration to hear. Caroline, I know you have a few closing slides and a bit of a commercial break, so I'll maybe hand things over to you.
Thank you very much, James. Such an informative session. I really enjoyed. For our last slide deck slides, I'm going to invite Debbie to present to us about Catalyst offering. Debbie.
Why did she do this to me? Only thing is, you guys all know we have the awards coming up, the Catalyst Markets. Most of you already know about that, so that's in the chat. James did mention Social Change Innovators and the resource available there. So we are happy for you to look at those resources and share them widely within your networks. But I will not take any more of your time. Wonderful session. Thank you so much. And I will watch the video for the beginning part that I missed while I was in the academic hub meeting.
Well, everyone on the call, thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. And I hope there's some nuggets you'll all be able to take away and incorporate into your own work. So be well, everybody, and take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Have a great day.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Thanks for Catalyst 2030.
Thank you all. Great session.